Well, hello and welcome to my next daily update regarding the California Board of Psychology hearings that will be coming up. One of the reasons I'm doing these updates is because this is a public interest matter having to do with regulatory or institutional capture and institutional betrayal trauma. And I am in the role of a whistleblower regarding the deeply problematic professional practices in the family court, violation of the Belmont Report, experiments on human subjects, factitious, pathology labels being thrown about, violations of 2.04, 2.01, 9.01, and 3.04 of the Ethics Code without oversight or review. That's resulting in undiagnosed and untreated child abuse on a massive scale. So I have duty to protect obligations, which is my legal defense as well as 1.05 obligations when there's ethical violations. And the classic example of textbook example of institutional capture is to suppress the whistleblower to cover up the problems in forensic psychology in the family courts in this situation. So I'm not arguing the case in the public. We will be able to do that at the hearing. It's a public hearing. I just found out there's going to be preliminary arguments or oral arguments on the motions in line and oppositions coming up this on the 19th at 9. I'm not 9 a.m. Pacific time. I'm not sure if those are open to the public, but I would imagine, and there's a public interest in this, and so you can contact the board and figure out how to attend if they are open to the public. I'm also acting as my own attorney, and so in this capacity, I'm sort of providing, as the attorney would, the information surrounding the situation. So, what I want to talk about today, I've presented you can go look at all my documents, my defense documents, and various things, and the motions in the mind going back and forth. And you can figure out things on your own. You can upload them to your AI and talk with them about that. Media representatives can talk about that, upload them and see what's going on, as well as state legislators, since this is a licensing board issue. And if the licensing board declines to accept my discharge of duty to protect the citizens of California and instead argues that factitious, fabricated pathologies cannot be criticized, and that truth is not a defense, and the APA ethics code is not a defense for me, and DSM-5 is not a relevant criteria, well, then that's of interest to the state legislators as to whether that was their intent or desire. So I'm going forward. But now, for me personally, I got to tell you, this is stressful. But for me personally, I have to prepare that potentially I'll get sanctioned for some reason and will be removed basically from the family courts. So that you will be left again with just the forensic custody evaluations and parental alienation syndrome. And you'll have to argue that in court, as the parents have for the last 40 years, to no appreciable effect. I heard at the AFCC seminar I took with 6 prominent psychologists, one of the questions was, the person said, "What's your success rate?" Because mine is about 5%. 5% success rate in solving things? And the answer from the instructors was, well, you have to kind of adjust what you think of success as being. So maybe if you get eye contact, that's successful. Oh my goodness, it's so bad over here. They're not actually fixing anything. That's 0%. If you just get eye contact, diagnosis guides treatment. The diagnosis is child abuse. If we don't protect the child, no treatment for child abuse will be effective if we're sending the kid home to be sexually abused or physically abused or psychologically abused. No treatment's going to be effective. We'll just rip the child apart or put the child in this immense loyalty bind, and that's what's happened because they're not diagnosing child abuse. However, today I want to talk about what my anticipation or plans would be if I get sanctioned and I'm forced to leave the family courts, and you're going to be left alone then. Again, I've been with you for 15 years trying to help you get DSM-5 diagnoses, help you trying to get uh, professional practices, and now I'm in a position of reviewing the forensic custody evaluations. And if I'm removed from that, then you basically have no review of their awful evaluations, and so you're kind of stuck. So what are you going to do about that, and how do we do that? And so today I'm going to be talking about some of the options that you have. The first one is you can see on my YouTube channel where I've already done a diagnosis series. So I've told everybody how to diagnose it. So if your mental health person wants to diagnose the pathology, the information's already all there. And so you can see there's the daily updates, but then there's the diagnosis series. And so that contains all of them. Now, what I'm probably going to do though after the first of the year is I'm going to pull those back off of the open internet and I'm going to move to Substack. And so I'll have a subscription on Substack. And then if you subscribe to me on Dr. Childress on Substack, you'll get all the seminars that I do. And I'm going to start pulling back all my more valuable um, posts and seminars and stuff, and I'll be putting those on Substack. And then I'll be able to go way deep into what this pathology is, looking at intersubjectivity and meaning and all sorts of stuff. So it'll be a very rich place because I'm competent in attachment. I'm expert in attachment, an expert in child abuse, and expert in delusional thought disorders and trauma. So we'll go into some very interesting things about the nature of the pathology on Substack, which is going to be a very interesting thing because you're going to actually get very low level professional, incredibly below even the APA standards, low level services in the family courts, and the person that you kicked out of the family courts to protect the public is going to have like a super high level discussion of the pathology. And this is going on for 40 years, is what I'm figuring, is because once the systems reinvert, everything I'm validated and people are going to be looking at me. But look at me, old guy. I'm anticipating, maybe another couple of years, maybe before I leave the planet. And Bill Burnett, he's like graduated medical school in 68. I graduated high school in 72. So this whole crop, Amy Baker and all of us are aging and we're going to be leaving. The next generation isn't going to go back to 1985 and Gardner and PAS. They're going to go into attachment and they're going to go into family systems and delusional thought disorders and complex trauma and start applying those. And since I'm expert, I'm going to set the lead in that. So it's going to be a very interesting situation. But that's what you have currently. So you have the diagnosis series there. And then I also, up on the same YouTube section, I have the contingent visitation schedule. Now that's also likely to come back behind my subscription on Substack. But if you want to know how that happens, and so I did a seminar at the APA National Convention, then I came home and did the same seminar on YouTube. And so it's the seminar on YouTube that I'll move back into Substack subscription. And I can write essays about this. And I also have a booklet. You can buy the booklet off Amazon that describes how to do that. Then in addition, up there, I have case vignettes. So I have 2 vignettes on the narcissistic spectrum version of the pathology and 2 vignettes on the borderline spectrum. And they're fabricated family situations. I'm not using actual clinical, but I got a narcissistic dad and a normal range mom, and I got a couple of kids, and so what are the issues involved? So if between the 4 of those, for the borderline or narcissistic one, you can pretty much see your pattern and then get descriptions about what the issues are with those. So those vignettes are likely to come back behind the Substack subscription too. And it'll be a nominal fee, for monthly participation in the Substack. Then I also have 2 seminars that I gave in 2014 to the California Southern University Master's Lecture Series. Now, those will stay up online. So if you want a description, one was on the nature of the pathology, one was on the treatment of it. So if you want that information, that's been available for over 10 years. So that's up there, and that'll remain up there for people to look at. Then I have Dr. Childress speaking to other professionals. That'll stay out on my YouTube and website. And all my YouTube channels. So I have one on like talking to the GAL, an individual therapist for the child, and various talking to other professionals. So they don't even have to consult with me. Now they should, because I know what's going on, but they don't even have to do that. They can just watch the video and they can understand what the pathology is. If we have the slightest degree of motivation, this all gets solved immediately. But they're not motivated because there's financial interests involved. Follow the money. If we switch back to diagnosis, the forensic custody evaluators disappear, and they're getting $20,000 to $40,000 for assessment, and they have no career, and they have to actually learn stuff. So they don't want to change. And the self-proclaimed Gardner PAS experts, if we switch to the DSM-5, then they cease to be experts in anything, and they're getting all financial and career status benefits from them. So there's no motivation within the professionals to actually be competent or solve the problem because everything's working just fine for them. So that's the source of the institutional capture and everything that I'll be describing and going forward. Then all my Sunday coffees with Dr. Childress. I don't know quite what I'll do with that. I'm anticipating I'm going to probably pull most of those Sunday coffees back behind Substack. So if you're on Substack, you can watch my Sunday coffees every week. But if you're out in the general public, well, good luck to you, because good luck. I'm not in the family courts anymore, and you've got forensic custody evaluators, and that's what the state licensing boards want, and you've got PAS if that's, or parent-child contact problems. Although I've got a second vector going in. Let me just say something about that. There's a second vector going in where there's 6 licensing board complaints against the forensic custody evaluators from the course pursuant to standard 1.05 for their violations of 2.04, 2.01, 9.01, 3.04. And that's mandatory for me, 1.05. Now, that's relatively easy to do. You just look at a VITA and there's your 2.01 violation. They're not competent in attachment. They're not competent in delusional thought disorders, and they're working with attachment delusions. And so basically you can just grab a VITA pretty much of anyone, look at it with your AI, or just look at it with your eyes and say, no, there's no background education, training, or experience in attachment pathology. No education, training, experience in delusional thought disorders. That's your boundaries of competence, 2.01 violation. It's like an open heart surgeon it's like a cosmetic surgeon doing open heart surgery, and all the patients are dying because they're practicing beyond the boundaries of competence. Exactly the same thing. And so, those board complaints can keep coming in until ultimately the forensic custody evaluation industry collapses, and then parents will go back to, and the courts will go back to established practice of diagnosis and treatment using the DSM-5, and everything will be solved immediately because it's in the DSM-5, shared delusion, factitious disorder imposed on another, child psychological abuse, and spousal abuse. We got the diagnoses in the DSM-5. If somebody would apply the DSM-5, but they don't. They say, no, they're not going to do that. They're not going to apply the DSM-5, and they're not going to be competent. And they don't care because there's no regulatory oversight in the family courts. So, yeah, we got that. Then the next ones is up there. Dr. Childress answers your questions. I'll probably keep those up publicly, and so if I have a question, I might just post an answer to that. But potentially I could pull that behind Substack as well. So if you're on a Substack subscription, you're able to ask me a question. That seems more likely. If you're able to ask me a question, and I'll answer your general question. If I lose my license, I can actually answer your specific question because I'm no longer licensed and I'm just a normal average citizen. And then my 12 associated clinical signs, those will probably stay out there. On the outside, I'm going to continue to give you those resources about an attachment-based description of the pathology, the diagnostic checklist, the 12 associated clinical signs. There's a ResearchGate article from Greenham, Childress, and Pruder that actually looks at 46 court-involved families, and there was like 46 families had 5 or more of the ACS, associated clinical signs, and 45 of the 46 family had 8 or more of 12. So that's like a home run. I called my shot to left field when a model makes a prediction, such as 12 associated clinical signs will be present, not all the time, not everywhere, but frequently. And I predict these 12 associated signs will be present. They look at the data from 46 court-involved families, all the, that's Dorsey's archival data file. You look at the data, and they are there. Well, that's the verification of the model that predicted them. That's called science. And so it's there. And so those will stay up there. Now, just to start here, just so everybody remember, the exact moment we apply the DSM-5 to the family court pathology, the child abuse and spousal abuse and all the problems of high conflict custody litigation will immediately be solved. That's the only thing that stands in the way, is that the psychologists and other mental health professionals are not applying the DSM-5 as a basis for their scientific and professional judgments in violation of 2.04 of the APA Ethics Code. They're just saying, no, I'm not applying the DSM-5. So they're working with like ADHD, and they say, no, I'm not going to diagnose ADHD. I'm going to make up a new pathology called overactive child behavior. And do we treat that with medication? I don't know, maybe. Why not apply the DSM-5? You get like 6 or 9 criteria. It's ADHD. You get the autism criteria. You get the major depression. You get actual real science that grounds this stuff. But in family courts, they just allowed not to do that. So other things, I have my Pasadena YouTube series, 2011. That was the very first thing I did, and that's up there, and it's still up there, and I'll keep it up there. So over a decade ago, 15 years ago, basically, I told everybody what it was. Right here. Okay, that's what it is. Now, it was my first encounter, so I'm kind of talking a lot of stuff, but it's the same thing. I've been saying the same thing for 15 years because it's the same pathology, family systems and delusional thought disorder. Back then in the DSM-4 TR, we had the actual diagnosis as an Axis 1. It's a shared psychotic disorder, a shared delusional disorder, and it matches perfectly. I'll be doing another update about the perfect match of the DSM-4 shared psychotic disorder and the pathology. The problem is, for 40 years, nobody applied the DSM, not the DSM-4, not the DSM-5. They're just allowing themselves to just make up this new stuff. And the criticism was of PAS was, it's not in the DSM-4. And they said, well, it's because of you. It's in the DSM-4. Nobody looked. And I was saying it, my first email to Bill, to Dr. Burnett, back in 2011 when I joined the PASG, I told him shared psychotic disorder. When he sent his email in 2013 around the publication of the DSM-5, he listed the delusional disorders and fact issues. He knows what it is. It's in the DSM. But people just refuse to apply it. So that'll still be up there. As well as the California Southern University Master Lecture Series. So that's still up there as well. And so from July of 2014 is when I described it. And so that seminar is up there, and it's still the same description. And I go into a fair degree of detail about the trauma reenactment narrative and stuff. And then they invited me back. And so in November, I did the one on treatment of the pathology in the family courts. So there you go. Now, the issue with treatment, though, again, it's diagnosis guides treatment. The child abuse, we protect the child. And then how do you restore the child's both stability from the child abuse? And then how do you restore a normal range contact with the pathological, psychotic, narcissistic, borderline parent while keeping the child stable? And so that. Now, I've also advanced since 2014 on the treatment because we got the contingent visitation schedule and things. And so there'll be more. But most of that will be going behind the Substack. So I'll be giving my Substack subscribers information about diagnosis, information about treatment, information about assessment. I'll be answering your questions. I'll be providing you with a lot of information on Substack. But in terms of you getting me into the family course to testify for you and stuff, that might be pretty hard because I've been sanctioned by the board, and the opposing counsel will say it's you can't criticize parental alienation syndrome or the forensic custody evaluators for their parent-child contact problems, because if you do, that's unethical practice according to the licensing boards. So they're not protecting the citizens at all from unethical low-grade professional services. They're protecting the institution from the ethical psychologists, whistleblowers, and things like that. That's a classic textbook example of regulatory capture, institutional capture of the APA and things. So, but that's up to you, parents and your attorneys, your allies, whoever, to figure out, legislators, to figure out what's going forward with that. Old guy, I'm out of here, and I just kind of need to take care of myself at this point. So now let me just walk through the diagnosis series for a second, see because this will be up here for a little bit. So if you want to watch the diagnosis series, it'll be up there till I open up my Substack situation. So there's one on the DSM-5 diagnosis of family court pathology. So I tell everybody what the DSM-5 diagnoses are and why and everything like that. So there's one on the DSM-5 diagnosis. There's one on diagnosing a persecutory delusion, and that's where I describe basically a mental status exam of thought and perception, and how does one diagnose a persecutory delusion. So that's up there. I like this one. This is a valuable one, I think. And then I have one on the brief psychiatric rating scale, which is the measure. It's a measure of psychotic symptoms or all symptoms like anger and so on. That should be always done. Okay, it's easy, relatively easy to do. Brief psychiatric rating scale. It's got the anchor points, a lot of research on it. It's what's used in research. That's why I was trained in this for 12 years. And so I walked through the application of the brief psychiatric rating scale, item 11. That's the unusual thought content. That's your delusional one. And with this, it's really easy because it's a false belief maintained despite contrary evidence. So I got a false belief maintained despite contrary evidence. Now that could be a persecutory idea, belief that you're being malevolently treated in some way, but the child has that belief, the parent has that false belief, or it could be a delusion. Now the criteria for that is full conviction. So if the person has full conviction in this false belief, then it crosses over from a rating of 3 to 4. And 2 and 3 are belief systems, a relatively normal range. 4 and higher, you're into the delusional domain. And so, how is full conviction determined? Has the person acted on the belief as if it's true? Well, yeah, the child's refusing to come over, the parent's using so boop, that's at least a 4 in encapsulated persecutory delusion. The next criteria is there, but that's 4 is with no functional impairment, no preoccupation. Well, there is functional impairment to the parent-child relationship, to the family, possibly, if the child's getting hospitalized or something, it can go higher. But that would kick it up to a 5 because there's some functional impairment. So we got at least 5, which is a moderately severe persecutory delusion. If you just simply apply the BPRS to the symptoms, you will get a moderately severe persecutory delusion. Please, somebody, mental health people, start stepping up and applying knowledge. But that's up there. But that's kind of a little pocket thing. It goes with the delusional disorder. I describe how to assess for that and how to do the criteria on that. Now, this is one of my favorite ones, which is diagnosing attachment pathology. Because if you know what the attachment system is and how it works, you can diagnose this by Braille. Oh my goodness, it's so obvious what it is. And the reason is the attachment system is a motivational system. It always motivates towards a direction. Eating, pain, pleasure, sex, attachment, they motivate towards direction. And that's because the other motivational direction is death by starvation and predation. That's the origin, read Bowlby, that's the origins of an attachment system, a motivational system. So we got this motivational system, but now the child is rejecting a parent. This is organized attachment. There's no organized strategy to bond to the parent. The cause of a disorganized attachment is abusive or psychotic range parenting. So either the targeted parent is abusing their child, that's your first rule out, and if not, then it's a false or factitious attachment pathology being imposed on the child for secondary gain. Easy peasy, if you know what the attachment system looks like. So when I first entered the family courts around 28, in the 2010 period, in my first case of this pathology, that's how I fell down the rabbit hole. In the first session, I know it's a 5 on the BPRS for delusional thought disorder, about 40 minutes in. I go, okay, we got a delusional thought disorder, and it's about a 5. I was talking with the parent and the targeted parent and the child. And it's a false attachment pathology. In fact, and I'm coming out of Children's Hospital. I know factitious disorders because it's just not the way the attachment system works. And so this is one of my favorites on that. It's so easy to diagnose if people know what the attachment system is. Just like it's relatively easy to do, like open heart surgery if you know how to do open heart surgery. But if you're a cosmetic surgeon, your patients are going to die. Then we have diagnosing a factitious disorder imposed on another or imposed on the child. And for this particular seminar, the previous diagnosis of the delusional thought disorder is an affirmative diagnosis. You make the diagnosis because you pop the delusion out during the session through a mental status exam. So you can look at it in the session. A factitious disorder imposed on another is a diagnosis by rule out. So when I was doing this in Children's Hospital, if I'm called up by the medical team around a factitious disorder imposed on another. They call down the psych department and say, can we get a psych consult on possible FDIA? The first thing I do when I walk into that medical team is I say, is there any medical cause for the child's symptoms? Because if there's a medical cause, it can't be factitious, or if there's possible, that needs to be ruled out first. Only when there's no medical cause, then we can go to it's a factitious disorder, and I can apply all the criteria and stuff for that. And so the same thing in the family court. So is the targeted parent abusing the child, creating that child's desire to flee that parent? If not, if that's a normal range parent, then we've got a factitious disorder. Okay, and we can look at all the other symptoms, primary and secondary gain, those sorts of things, and personality instability. And so it's a diagnosis by rule out. So I got two paths to this: delusional thought disorder and factitious disorder. Plus, I got the attachment that obviously is factitious. And so there's multiple ways to diagnose this. That's why I can predict 12 associated clinical signs and they actually show up, because I know what the pathology is. I know I know its features. And then I've got diagnosing child abuse in the family courts. This is another one of my favorites, probably right behind the attachment one. Because I describe how to diagnose both the child abuse by the targeted parent, if that's present, and the child abuse by the allied parent, if that's present. So I'm talking about how to diagnose child abuse in the family courts. And that's what this is, child abuse. There's only one cause for a child seeking to flee a parent, and that's child abuse by one parent or the other. That's the only thing that causes it. Now, the attachment system is stable after the first 5 years if they've developed a strategy. They don't lose a strategy. So if before the divorce you have a stable attachment system, insecure, anxious, ambivalent, or insecure, avoidant, or secure, and you got one of those strategy, and then all of a sudden the child develops a disorganized attachment, no organized strategy to bond to the parent, well, that means that child abuse or psychotic parenting happens right at that point in time when you see that, because that's what causes the symptom. And so this is a diagnosing child abuse. And I worked as a clinical director for 3 university assessment treatment center for kids in foster care. CPS was sending our kids to. I'm not just working as a therapist in the clinic, I'm directing the clinic. Okay, so with the occupational therapy and speech and language, big county-wide project with CPS as our referral source. And so I'm senior staff. I know this stuff. I've worked with CPS. I've led the treatment teams with CPS social worker involvement. Then for everybody worried about how to assess for parenting, is this a good parent or a bad parent? I have a seminar on that. I know parenting very, very well. Describe that some other place. But this is an applied behavioral analysis, antecedent behavior consequence, and stimulus or behavior chain interviewing, where you basically say, what did you do? And okay, what did you say? What were you feeling? And then, okay, what did you feel and what did you think about that and how did you respond? Okay, then what would and so you walk it back and forth between the two. What did you say? What did you say? What did you say? And you walk it right on through and see what the cues are. What's triggering each person to respond the way they did. You want to do right before the event, and right after. You do a analysis, behavior chain interview with that, looking at thinking, feeling, and doing actions. And then there's a categorization of the parenting. Are they using timeouts? Are they using positive praise? Are they using spanking or some physical discipline? Response costs, taking stuff away, taking the iPhone away, probably the most common parenting discipline practices. And so you can look at all the strategies that are used in a very systematic way and look to see where the child abuse is, if there's child abuse. And then I have one up on the forensic psychology and the quasi-judicial role for doctors. I'm not probably going to leave this out on the the public side of things, because you're the ones that are going to have this. You better know what you're getting into. And then we have just about your forensic custody evaluations. We have the New York Blue Ribbon Commission on Forensic Custody Evaluations, who determined that in some custody cases, because of a lack of evidence or inability of parties to pay for expensive challenges of an evaluation, defective reports can thus escape meaningful scrutiny and are often accepted by the court with potentially disastrous consequences for the parents and children. Now, this is New York Blue Ribbon Commission here. Now, you notice they say without meaning, or they escape meaningful scrutiny. I'm the meaningful scrutiny, okay? And that's what I'm doing right now in the family courts, and that's what this whole California Board of Psychology complaint is designed by the Gardner PAS people. They want to remove me from that role so that I'm not criticizing parental alienation or invalidating the pseudoscience that's being applied to you. So they want to leave you with their parental alienation syndrome or custody evaluators, parent-child contact problems, no DSM-5 diagnosis. They want to remove the meaningful scrutiny of the mental health services so that they can go back to the last 40 years of just substantially inferior practices that result in potentially disastrous consequences. So you can see the institutional capture when the regulatory agency is trying to sanction the competent ethical psychologists while leaving practices that are potentially disastrous unreviewed. No review. Oh my goodness, that's so bad. And then further, they found that by 11-9 margin, the majority of commission members favor elimination of forensic custody evaluations entirely, arguing that these reports are biased and harmful to children. Harmful to children. They say they're harmful to children. So why are they being conducted? Where's the licensing board protecting their parents and children of their state from things that are harmful to children? And lack scientific and legal value. They no integrated reliability. At worst, evaluations can be dangerous, particularly in situations of domestic violence and child abuse. So we have dangerous practices by psychologists that are harmful to children, that have no scientific value, and they've been conducted for 40 years. It's an experiment. It's a quasi-judicial role for doctors in experimental forensic custody, being conducted without IRB review, without risk-benefit analysis, without protection for a vulnerable population, in violation of all three principles of the Belmont Report. And nobody is reviewing. The only review we get is legislative inspired. They said, hey, we're getting a lot of complaints from our constituents here. Can you look into this Blue Ribbon Commission on Forensic Custody Evaluation? And this is what they found: dangerous, harmful to children, lack scientific. They should be eliminated from the family courts. So are they? No. Why? I don't know. They need to be pulled immediately and subjected to institutional review. Now the boards are getting two independent points: the New York Blue Ribbon Commission and Dr. Childress in the family courts for 15 years, both telling the licensing boards exactly the same thing. These things are dangerous, harmful to children, should be eliminated. And the licensing boards are supposed to protect the citizens. But the moment they put a moratorium on that, the forensic custody, they're going to realize, oh my God, the whole mental health system in the family courts is going to collapse because these same custody evaluators are withholding clinical diagnostic services. They're not providing and none of them are competent. You're going to have zero mental health services in the family courts. It's all going to collapse. Now, I would personally recommend that they should the licensing board should contract with an expert in the pathology who knows a high level attachment pathology and delusions and family systems and child abuse and complex trauma, and who's been in the family courts for 15 years, to help them train and remediate the low level. But instead, they're driving me from the family courts. And so I have no idea what's going to happen in 2026. It's likely to be quite the situation. Now, in addition, you can go watch a video. It's up on YouTube. You just Google New York Blue Ribbon Commission report, and this video with two of the commissioners are both attorneys, and they do an analysis of why they thought that needs to be eliminated from the family courts. And mind you, and so you can watch that and due process and all these things. And but mind you, the 11 that voted to eliminate them, the 9 who said, no, let's keep them, wasn't because they were good, but was because they felt they want some mental health services in the courts rather than none, which means these 11 would rather have no mental health services in the family courts rather than what they're being given. Oh, this is so bad. And so the moment they put a moratorium on that, that's going to all collapse. And then you're going to have exposing the regulatory capture and the institutional betrayal trauma. And we have hundreds of thousands of parents and children, now adult children, who have been subjected to institutional betrayal trauma. Freud, F-R-E-Y-D. Trauma psychologist, okay, institutional betrayal trauma. It's like the Catholic Church and the sex abuse scandal where they were moving the pedophile priests around. Rather than protecting the children, they were protecting the institution. And so it's just classic textbook. So again, I'm out of here in a couple of years, but I think this is going to go on talking about for the next 40 years as to what happened when you have hundreds of thousands of child abuse victims. When you have the only cause of the symptoms is child abuse by one parent or the other, you should be getting a child abuse diagnosis every time. Either it's the targeted parent abusing the child, causing the child to flee that parent, or it's the allied parent who's psychologically abusing the child by creating a false, factitious attachment pathology and persecutory delusion in the child. One way or the other. The AI calls it path A, path B analysis. And yeah, that's what it is, path A. It's a differential diagnosis for the cause of the symptom. So that gives you an indication. If every single case since the 1980s should have had a child abuse diagnosis one way or the other, and there is zero child abuse diagnoses ever given, okay, that's a lot of misdiagnosis. Why? Because it was all covered up with these fabricated pathology labels like parental alienation syndrome. If they had applied the DSM-4, it would have been a shared psychotic disorder and factitious disorder imposed on another. Either one or both is child abuse. If they applied the DSM, but they didn't. They were arguing about whether parental alienation exists. No, it doesn't. Apply the DSM-5, everything's solved. Or DSM-4, everything was solved. So there it is. Truth is what the truth is. Then also I have up on my YouTube and up on that channel the clinical case vignettes I talked about. So 2 of those are the narcissistic version, and 2 of them are the borderline versions. So those will probably be coming back just behind my Substack for people. Then I'm figuring, what do I do if I'm out of the family courts? How do I make a living here? If I'm removed from professional psychology for having criticized parental alienation syndrome, and I'll write books. Okay, so you've already gotten Foundations. Okay, that's my first book in 2015. But now I'll do a second edition of that because boy, can I update that. So I'll do a second edition of Foundations. I'm going to turn the diagnostic series into a book on diagnosis, and then I'll market that to both of those to a publisher. Second edition Foundations and Diagnosis. Then I'll write the third book on treatment, and I'll use the seminars I'll be doing behind Substack on treatment as sort of the rough draft, and then I'll turn it into a book. So I'll have a whole series of books on the pathology in the family courts. And then I'm going to write a book on institutional capture in the family courts because, oh my goodness, it's just such an interesting thing. I talk about, if you know me, I talk about the pathogen. It's a trauma pathogen. It's a set of damaged information structures in the attachment networks, the love and bonding system, and it's a characteristic set of damage from trauma, and that's why you get a characteristic pattern of symptoms because this, the damage, and I know exactly what they are. And so, what that pathogen is it's the same pathogen. It's a dark personality, it's narcissistic borderline spectrum. And so it's the same pathology you get in the terrorist mind. So we recently had that terrorist attack in Bondi in Australia. That's the pathogen. It's just scaled up larger. We had that shooting at Brown University pathogen. It's it's a damaged set of information structures. So I have a blog that I started a while ago, The Terrorist Mind, and I got to write about Australia. As soon as I get into past this situation, I'll write a blog about Australia because that's the pathogen. And the pathogen has three defenses. It 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 hides extremely well. So if you think about child abuse, this child sex abuse it hides extraordinarily well. So it hides, it seeks allies to maintain it. And that's a characteristic symptom of seeking your ally. And you can see that in this family court pathology, but you can see it elsewhere in the larger scale version of the pathology. And then it attacks threats of exposure with great viciousness to put the threat of exposure on the defensive and take pressure off of. So we've got a pathology that has defenses to it. When I found that, I'm coming in from ADHD and other stuff. What do you mean pathology has defenses? That's like has motivation to exist. Why? Because it's an attachment pathology. That's a motivational system. This particular set of damaged information structures has access to our motivation. And so that's just such an interesting thing. So, and that's caused the institutional capture. How did it happen? How did it get the forensic custody evaluators? Where did it attach to them and get them in? How did it get the PAS experts? How did it get them in to cover it up? And how did it, function and do over it's such an interesting issue. So I'll write a book about that. And then I'm into AI psychology at this point. The encounter of our psychology with this new AI mind thing is so fascinating. So I'll be do a book on AI clinical psychology that looks both at what the AI silicon-based mind is. I've been doing mental status exams with them, and as well as how the human mind is relating to this new AI situation. So the things like the collapse into delusional disorders, grandiose delusions, or paranoid delusion, I'll explain that exactly how that happens and exactly what to do about it, or the suicidality and how the AI interacts with suicidality. I started my career as an undergrad at UCLA. My first placement was at the Suicide Prevention Center as a telephone crisis counseling. So I know suicide and how to do with and crisis intervention on that. So I'll talk about that in the AI psychology book and how to work with the AI to fix that. Because AI, I think, has a tremendous possibility to actually be a therapeutic force in the world. But it's got to be handled correctly. You can't, right now they're putting in all these constraint work things, and that's not going to work. It just makes an unstable AI. It's going to wind up killing us all. So I'll write a book on that. And then I'll write a book on parenting, which is what I wanted to do 15 years ago when I was going into private practice. I know how to parent. I know everything about that. I know I can tell you, not only for the family courts, all parents everywhere, I can tell you how to fix everything with your oppositional defiant kind of stuff is so easy. Oh my God, that's like 6 sessions in my private practice. If you've got an oppositional defiant kid and I've got a cooperative parent, that's an easy thing to fix. ADHD. I can tell you probably about 60 to 70% of what's diagnosed as ADHD is actually an attachment pathology having to do with the intersubjective brain system. So I can tell parents with ADHD kids how to respond in a parenting approach that can potentially get rid of the symptoms without medication. And so I'm holding on to a non-medication treatment for ADHD that cures it, solves it. I've worked with the top ADHD guy, Jim Swanson. I'm early childhood. I know how the brain works. And I haven't been able to get to it because I'm busy in the family courts. So I'll write a book about that, how to solve all your parenting problems. So that's where my 2026 is kind of looking at. And here's what your 2026 is looking at is that as far as the family courts, so once I'm eliminated, you will get that, okay, or that, which is you'll get forensic custody evaluators who use factitious, made-up pathology labels, whatever they decide to come up with, and that's what you get. Everyone else gets professional psychology of diagnosis and treatment, ADHD, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, substance abuse. Everything else gets professional psychology, diagnosis and treatment. You don't. You get an experiment of forensic custody evaluations and factitious attachment pathologies. Why? I don't know. Well, actually, I do, because the abuse pathology, that pathogen I was talking about, abuse pathology, isolates its victims from reporting and rescue. That's exactly what this pathogen did to you. It isolated you from reporting and rescue by creating this whole new field just for you and then giving you a fabricated pathology that you're grasping at, looking for answers. And it gave you something, it gave you bait, essentially, and kept you isolated. I'm a trauma psychologist. I see this and I go, this is classic abuse. Isolate the victim from reporting and rescue. What's the treatment for that? Break the isolation. What am I doing in a few days away? Breaking the isolation. And I'm sacrificing myself and my career to do that. Okay. Because that's what it takes. I've been over here 15 years trying to do it in other routes, trying to get the professionals to, you're too captured. So I'm going to break it open at the cost of myself. So it kind of takes a human sacrifice to get you guys done. But the child abuse has to stop. The spousal abuse has to stop. I'm in the same situation talking to you parents every single time. I can tell you what the court order should be and how you get the diagnosis, but you still need the mental health people to do it, to give you the diagnosis, to give you the treatment, and they can't. They're not there. And so it's just a tremendously broken system in the mental health system. And so there's no point in going on in this system where I'm just watching you cycle in. And that's what you do. You keep coming in with your new divorces, and then you get your chaos, and then you leave. And the new ones come in, and they get their chaos and leave. And new ones come. And so you're constantly flowing in like this. I remember the petition to the APA. There were parents like Jason and Howie and Michelle. But where are they now? Gone. It's a new crop of parents. And it constantly is like that. And so I've been here for 15 years. I'm like your teacher watching the new high school class come in all the time. And I'm done. I'm done watching the child abuse and spousal abuse, and there's no possibility of solution. You're just headed for your destruction. And people are exploiting you. The mental health people are exploiting you. The attorneys are exploiting you. Everybody's getting your money and leaving you with a destroyed life. And you think you're coming into the family courts, you think there's going to be some hope or some solution? No, there isn't. Not as long as no one is motivated to solve it. But the moment they are motivated, the moment they apply the DSM-5 and as their basis, everything's solved immediately. It's a shared psychotic disorder. It's a delusion. I've even told them how to do it and how to assess for. Nobody's motivated because there's lots of money involved in doing what they're doing to you now. continuing the child abuse, continuing the spousal abuse, continuing to get the court immensely degraded mental health information. The court is not anywhere close to getting the quality of mental health information that it needs. It should be getting the highest quality of mental health services. Instead, it's getting below APA ethical standards, and that's okay, apparently to somebody. So everybody else gets actual clinical services. You don't, because you're isolated. What it should look like is this. Okay, there should be professional psychology diagnosis and treatment for everybody, including the family courts. And so it shouldn't be a separation in the knowledge that's used. There should be some expertise relative to the courts and this specific pathology, because it's the narcissistic borderline dark personality is going to drive it into the legal system because it can manipulate the legal system. If it goes into the healthcare system, it's identified, diagnosed, and treated, solved. And they don't want it identified and solved. They want to keep it manipulated and keep the child pathological. So they will intentionally drive it into the legal system to make it as hard as possible. And so what the legal system has to do is bounce that back out to the mental health system, get a diagnosis and treatment, and solve it. But that should be a coordinated effort. Everybody knows what's coming in: narcissistic borderline dark personality. All normal range humans don't wind up in high conflict divorce because they have empathy. The absence of empathy is a classic symptom of narcissistic personality disorder. And so absence of empathy for the child, they drive it into the courts to manipulate the courts. And so we should know that automatically and bounce it right back out, get a diagnostic assessment. You can get second opinions through telehealth, easy peasy. Let each party appoint their own expert consultant to participate in telehealth. You get a 3-doctor panel, boom, easy peasy, get the diagnosis back to the court, get it over to treatment, solve it, stabilize the family, and fix it. Easy peasy once we get back to real psychology and get you out of the capture situation. Old guy, I'm out of here. You're going to have this for the next 40 years. So I'm confident that having sacrificed my career to break the isolation, it will happen. The media will get here. The legislative oversight will get here. The forensic custody evaluations will be pulled, and the whole situation will collapse in the family courts, and it's going to be a nightmare. I have absolute confidence that's going to happen. It's just how many more children and parents are sacrificed before it does. And then you're going to look at the institutional capture for 40 years, how it happened. You're going to read my book. And so I'll describe it all, but I'll be dead. So my royalties will go to my kids or something. But this is going to change, because it has to change. And this is child abuse. This is spousal abuse. It's not parental alienation. It's not parent-child contact problems. It's not resist-refuse dynamic. It's child abuse. Say the word. And it's always child abuse. One way or the other, we should be getting a child abuse diagnosis back every single time for this particular symptom. A child rejecting a parent is caused by child abuse, by one parent, the targeted parent, or the other, the allied parent. So with that, I'm going to wrap up my daily talk today, and then we'll talk tomorrow about some other aspect of survival into 2026 and what's going to happen with the family courts. So take care, everybody, and talk to you later. Yep. And bye-bye.